And my baseball coach was a hockey coach, and he talked my dad into bringing me out. Otherwise, I may not have played.
Hey, and welcome to the Gentlemen's Sports Club. My name is David Turner, and today I'm really excited to bring to you a continuation of our interview series. Today we have a Boston Bruins legend, Nifty Rick Middleton. He is one of only 11 Boston Bruins players to have their number retired. He's also third overall in points scored for the Bruins and the leader in shorthanded goals. We got into everything here, from his playing career to his time as the head coach of the 2002 US National Sled Hockey team. We got into the movie that's coming out about that incredible story, and also the book. So without further ado, here's Nifty. I hope you enjoy. Nifty, thank you so much for joining the show today. This is an amazing opportunity to get to talk to you, and I know our listeners are extremely excited to hear from you. It's you're a legend in the Boston community,
Well,
a Bruins legend, absolutely.
I guess the longer
890.
You're out, you can't be a legend until you're old. I think the years help.
Yeah, but also your play on the ice. I mean, 898 points in 881 games. That's nothing to sneer at.
No, I'm proud of that.
And third in Bruins history in scoring, and you're the all-time leader in shorthanded goals. So,
well, that's going to be. I'm going to move down to fourth as soon as Bergeron's back, because he's only 2 goals behind me.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah. Still, that's not a bad place to be. You're one of the.
He's a great.
You're one
guy.
of 11. You're one of 11 to have your jersey, your number retired by the Boston Bruins as well. I got to ask you, Nifty, what was that like? As a kid in Toronto, did you ever imagine in your wildest dreams that night in 2018, when they retired your number, that would have come up and happened for you?
No. Are you kidding? When I grew up in Toronto in the 60s playing youth hockey, it was so different. There's only 3 channels on TV. I said, there was no internet.
Yeah.
And you were looking for things to do. And luckily, I actually got introduced to hockey, youth hockey, through baseball. I was playing softball, as my, a 6-year-old. I still have the picture somewhere for Bix Pickles. And my baseball coach was a hockey coach, and he talked my dad into bringing me out. Otherwise, I may not have played. And I just worked my way up in Toronto. And I was a Leaf fan. They won 4 Stanley Cups in the 60s. So, as I said, Hockey Night in Canada on Saturday night, that was our entertainment. My mom, my grandmother, my dad, when he wasn't working, was printing business. We'd all watch it. And I just got lucky. I got good coaching, I had great teammates, and I loved the game. And I played street hockey, road hockey, as they call it in Canada, every day, but I wasn't on the ice. And I was learning, I didn't know it, but I was learning as much about the game on the road as I was on the ice. It's morphed into a career.
And what was it? I've always wondered this, as in all sports, when you hear that a guy grew up a certain, a fan of a certain team, like you just said, you're a Leafs fan. What's it like to get drafted by, the Rangers, right? And a totally different team representing a totally different city.
I was older then. As a joke, the Leafs won their last cup in 1967.
Yeah,
and I said I grew up after that.
Yeah.
By the time I played 2 years of junior in Oshawa, I was just happy to be drafted. And in my last year of junior, I had the best year of my hockey career in total. I scored the most goals in the league, 67. Not even a record, believe it or not. And that kind of propelled me into the first round territory. And to be drafted by an original 16, because I grew up in the original 6 era, up until 68. So to be drafted by the New York Rangers, it was a huge thrill. Nothing against the Minnesota North Stars or the Philadelphia Flyers, but the New York Rangers were one of the original six. And but I wasn't hoping when you're being drafted, you're just hoping somebody will pick you up and you'll end up playing in the NHL one day. But like I said, that's just the first step. That's not the last step. That's just the first step. And there's a lot more ahead of that. But the Rangers were great. If you remember, in '72, Bruins beat them in 6 games. And I got drafted the next year. I went to training camp, and the Rangers still had a Stanley Cup team. So I didn't make it out of training camp. So they sent me to the American League team, which is right down the road in Providence, Rhode Island. It's the Providence Reds. So when I was 19 years old, I was living in Cranston, Rhode Island. And little did I know that a couple of years later, I'll be back in New England for the rest of my life. Kind of strange how life works.
And you're on a New England podcast, so we definitely love that you stuck around. And it's beautiful. I mean, this area is just second to none. I actually moved out to Charlotte for like 7 years, and work took us there, and we came back. And thank God we came back, because
you've got everything
it's just
here. You've got everything. And, depending on what you like to do. Some people are lake people, some people are ocean people, mountain, whatever you like, you got it here.
The seasons do it for me. I grew up, having a snow on the ground in the wintertime, and
me too. But I'm tired of the seasons. But we won't go into that.
Yeah. So I was reading in prep for this interview, I was reading an article. This article was in Sports Illustrated in 1981. And it said, to get to the bottom of Middleton's success, you've got to search all the way down to his skates. The blades on most players' skates are fastened to the boot and steel rivets. Because the shifty Middleton seemed to skate on his ankles half the time, his blades are attached with more durable copper studs. Bruin trainer Dan Canny says that without the copper studs, you'd be popping out of your skates all night. In his 18 years on the job, Canny has only met one other player who required copper studs, and that was Bobby Orr. So I'm curious. I was reading about this, and I'm a hockey fan, right? But I don't know the technicalities of things like skating on your ankles or requiring certain studs like that. I'm curious, how does that help? How did that help your game? And
let's say I only skated on my ankles when I started playing hockey. I didn't skate on my ankles as a pro, but my game was lateral. I was pretty quick north and south. Today's game was north and south. The speed is everything. And in the era that I played in, I tried to slow the play down a little, so that way change speed so the defensemen get mixed up, and by the time they figure it out, they're standing still. But my game was left and right, lateral. So I would cut very often at full speed, left or right of the defenseman, and that puts a lot of pressure on the blades and the rivets, ultimately. And not knowing it myself, the trainers were the ones that I think got tired of putting the other rivets in because they kept loosening and decided to put the copper ones in. But, I really didn't have anything to do with it. I didn't even know they were popping out. So.
That's too funny. I got to ask you, all the accolades, right? And let's put the retirement of the jersey aside for a second. What would you say was your proudest moment of your playing career?
Oh, boy.
And I've got to put the 2018 aside because I think, any athlete seeing like everything come together in one moment would have to be one of the proudest moments. So I'm going to make it hard on you here.
Never winning a Stanley Cup, I think the guys that have won it multiple times say that first one was the one because it's the first. Playing in the Stanley Cup Finals is just unbelievable. And I was lucky enough to play in 3. Lost all of them, 2 to Montreal, 1 to Edmonton. Last year, Gretzky was there. I scored in overtime my first year in Boston, in Philadelphia, in the Spectrum against Bernie Perrott. That was, and we went on to win 4 straight and knock them out. So I've had several. I think looking back as a something that over many years happened was being part of the 11 goal scorers, the 11-20 goal scorers. It's still an NHL record more than 40 years later. No other team has been able to do it. And I was part of that 11-20 goal scorer and still an NHL record. So I'm pretty proud of that.
It is pretty amazing. I mean,
and we had a reunion a couple of years ago. And Don Cherry even came down for it. And a lot of us, for the first time in close to 40 years, saw each other again.
Yeah, I was listening to an interview. I'm sorry, it wasn't an interview. I believe it was, they were doing the video phone-ins for your number retirement. And I forget who it was, but somebody said that when you came to the Bruins early on, you were, I don't know if the term is very, I don't know, quiet was the word that they used. And they said Don Cherry didn't know how to handle you, that they didn't know how to work you in. And that they ended up obviously figuring it out. But that was an interesting quote.
Don and I don't remember that one, but quiet really wouldn't be one way. Although I am somewhat reserved.
Yeah,
but, when I got to Boston, when I played in New York, I didn't make the NHL for my fighting ability. I made the NHL because I could score goals, and that's all they wanted me to do in New York. And you know, not that they didn't have a defensive system, but I don't remember anybody ever really stressing it that you have to play this way. And then my second year in New York, we had 3 different coaches. They were cleaning house. They didn't make the playoffs, so it was this pandemonium. So by the time I got to Boston, they still had their nucleus, and they had a new coach in Don Cherry, and he wanted the team to play a certain way. I mean, he traded Phil Esposito because he wanted more of a defensive-oriented team. And I had to buy into that. And so Don always jokes that he had to introduce me to the goalie at the end of the year because I was never back in my own. But we have a good relationship like that. We like to joke with each other. But, and when I got to Boston, there was no openings, really. They made the trade, but Wayne Cashman was playing right side where Kenny Hodge was. And Johnny Busick was still playing. And so I just didn't walk into a job, although he played me my first game as a Bruin, and I got a hat trick. So he was like, what am I going to do with him next? Yeah. I got 3 of my first game. I only ended up with 20 of the whole year because that's how much I was playing.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I know Ray Bork, teammate of yours and another Bruins great. He was recalling watching basically your highlight reels to get pumped up for games.
Oh, really?
And I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I think that makes you a legend. So if you got Ray Bork talking about you that way, that's a hell of a player. I'll tell you that.
Him and I are still good friends. And I was so fortunate to be on that team when he came up as a rookie, and to watch him develop into the player that he became. And he went through a lot of phases. Over 20 years, you have to. And the game changed a lot. The helmets, he came in just when the helmet rule was coming in. Yeah. And then in the 90s, the game changed, and it really got a lot more, I would say, stick work and dirty like that. And, so he adapted to it as he got older. And he had an amazing career, and he's an amazing guy. I didn't know that. He said that. That's the first time I've heard.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. I also want to ask you, because this is really interesting. So you were the head coach of the 2002 US Paralympic Sled Hockey team. You coached that team to Team USA's first ever gold medal, and they had actually from what I found out, only ever won one international game prior to that season when you came in. First of all, I just want to ask, how were you approached with that opportunity? How did that fall into your lap?
I got a phone call. Really. And this will all be in the movie, I hope.
Yeah. And by the way, let me just tell everybody, there's a movie coming out
there's
called
a movie
Tough Sledding,
in
right?
the works for the last 5 years called Tough Sledding. And we're getting closer. We're in pre-production. And a book called Hockey's Greatest Stars is coming out in December. But so I won't tell you like the whole story because we don't have that much time. I got a phone call from a friend of mine, Paul Edwards, who was on, I believe, the captain of the US disabled ski team. And unbeknownst to me, he played sled hockey. I didn't know anything about sled hockey. I didn't know what it was. But he called me up. He said, told me the team was in a shambles. The coach quit after the World Championships in 2000. They were going to be the host team in Salt Lake City in 2002.
Right.
They don't have a coach. Would you be interested? So my mind just like went so quickly because I thought if I ask somebody questions, they're going to say, "Oh, forget it." Or so. And then the next thing he asked me, he said, "You do know what sled hockey is, right?" And I lied. I said, "Oh yeah, I know." All I heard was Paralympics and hockey, and I figured, hey, sounds good to me. I'm not going to be invited to coach the Olympic team anytime soon. And this was be a great challenge, even though they had only won one game in their history, and it was a consolation game against Great Britain, who I didn't even know had a team. But there were no dreams of gold medals or anything like that. And what makes it a compelling story is how they started. You know, we only had 5 guys from the 98 to 2000 World Championship. We had a completely new team. But I didn't know any history of it. And then we had a selection camp in August 01, and 9/11 happened. And we never played another team. We were supposed to go to Canada and play Canada, Japan, and us, September 12th. And we obviously never went. And we never played a team for 6 months. We only had 4-day camps, 6 4-day camps to get ready for Salt Lake City. So going into Salt Lake City, we did not have a clue how we would do. And we won every one of our games. We outscored the opposition 22-3 in 5 games. We spanked number 1 seed Canada 5-1 in front of 6,000 people. And ended up in a gold medal game against Norway, who were the reigning champs from Nagano in 98. And it went down to a shootout, and it went down to the last shooter. You can't write a script like that. People would think it would be
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's a great story. And it's going to make a great movie.
That's one of those things you see in a movie and you're like, oh, that's just, you know, of course that's going to happen like that.
We didn't want it to go to the last shooter. Trust me.
Nobody ever does.
We were lucky to prevail, trust me. And, because of how great, we had 3 guys on our team were the grandfathers of sled hockey in the United States. They were on the very first team, and they were on our team in 2002. So.
And you had mentioned something too while you were talking about that, about 9/11 happening during that season. Did you get the sense though that after that moment, and you did kind of go on to play and win, that that this became sort of a rallying cry, that this team became, sort of a symbol of unification and kind of everybody coming around the team? I'm
sure you were pretty young back then. But the airports were empty. And it was only 6 months after 9/11. And there was a lot of patriotism, if you will. So when we won the gold medal in the Star Spangled Banner plate, it wasn't a dry eye.
Yeah, I imagine.
And my
That's
assistant
incredible.
coach, Tom Moulton, from Hampton, New Hampshire, good friend of mine, good hockey guy, owns a company called Sleepnet in town, and he gave up his time. And he didn't know what sled hockey was either, but he figured if I wanted to do it, he'd do it with me. And the 2 of us took this on, and it turned out great.
Yeah, absolutely. So once the pomp and circumstance ended, meaning you came in and the newness wore off, and you actually had to start doing some coaching. what was immediately apparent to you that had to change? Like what did you have to come in and go, nope,
Well,
we got to scrap that?
A couple of things. And again, what makes a good Hollywood movie is you have to have conflict. And there was a coach from the Chicago team, because there were teams around the country where these guys played. He wanted to be coach. And he convinced the players that he should be coach. He was in line for it. And then they took me out of the door where he didn't like it very much. So the Chicago players and the rest of the guys kind of had a conflict. Kind of like in Miracle with the Minnesota guys and the New England guys. It's kind of the conflict. So it started out that way, and it ran all the way into Salt Lake City.
Yeah.
But as a team, just looking at films, because we never played anyone, we saw that, A, we needed more speed on defense. They were getting beat, breakaway, odd man rushes all the time. And secondly, they didn't play a system. They basically chased the puck around because the other team had it most of the time. And we recognized, like women's hockey, and most of the goals come from around 10 feet around the net. They're not a big booming slap shot from the point very often. And if you don't get the puck down low, you're probably not going to score. So we developed an old Don Cherry system where you dump the puck in and you just run their defense. Because it's a full check game at the Olympic level, Paralympic level.
Yeah,
it's
I imagine.
not a recreational game. It's pretty dirty. So you go in and you pinch off the defenseman, you force the pass around the boards, you get the centerman to go on the side where the pass is coming, or the defenseman to pinch down, and the centerman count. It's old-time hockey, but it worked. And we only got 3 goals against us in 5 games. But we got 3 against us in the gold medal game. So, that team knew how to win, Norway.
This is like made for TV stuff. I guess it sort of makes sense then. But let me ask you. So you've mentioned that the movie is in the works still. You do have a release date, however, for the book, right?
December, I'm told, and I believe pre-orders are available on Amazon right now. Hockey's Greatest Gods. If somebody wants to look
Hockey's Greatest Gods. Yeah, amazing. All right. Now, moving on here, you're also the president of the Boston Bruins Alumni Association.
For a little while longer. Yeah.
Yep. So was this something that you sought out, or I guess, or did it just sort of, did you get a phone call?
Around 2000, well, I started playing with the alumni in the mid-90s. When my career ended in 89. Playing charity games here and there when I'm available. So I'd been with the alumni for several years. And in 2000, we decided to go to a board. So we voted in a board. And Bob Sweeney was made president, and I was voted in as vice president. So a couple years later, in 2007, the Bruins started the Bruins Foundation, Boston Bruins Foundation. They asked Bob if he'd head up the foundation, and they didn't want him to wear 2 hats. So me as vice president, I just moved up as president in 2007, and I've been there for 15 years, and up until December 31st of this year, and then we're handing it over to Frank Simonetti, who I played with in the 80s, Middleton College graduate. Going to do a great job. Frank is a good organizer. He's run several charitable events. One bowl with the Bruins that we have coming up in September for, I think, last 5 years.
And what kind of work, because our listeners likely don't know, what kind of work does the association do, and what's some of the stuff that you're most proud of in that role?
Well, we raise, with COVID, it's backed off a little bit, but in our heyday, we were playing 30 or more games a year for 30 different charities. We're helping to help these charities raise money that would add up to close to $500,000 every year. So over the years, we've helped, different charities. Some like Mass Down Syndrome Congress has been doing it for 15 years. They've raised over $1 million just playing games with us, which makes us very proud.
Yeah, that's such amazing work, and I just, as I've kind of poured through your history, I've just noticed that as much as the game's given to you, you've given back in spades. I mean, in every way, it seems. And it's apparent that your love for the game, it's burning more than ever. Like, there's just the way that you stay around it.
Fortunately, my body's telling me that I can't do it anymore.
I gotcha.
Haven't skated much in the last 2 years. Believe it or not, I fell on ice in my driveway just before COVID.
Oh, man.
I just lodged my L5, so I had to get an operation on my back that was delayed because of COVID. And then during COVID, my knee went. I didn't do anything; it just wore out, bone on bone. So I had to replace my right knee. So I really haven't skated much over the last 2 years.
Right.
You know, just kind of approaching my 69th birthday, and it's time for me to retire and let some of the younger people take over with their own run. When I'm around, I'll still be involved. I'll still promote and coach or be involved in events. But as far as running the show, I think it's time to go. Stage right.
Well, you've certainly given back more than anybody would have ever expected.
I've been fortunate. It's a great game. I've been playing it since my dad froze a rink in the backyard for me when I was 4 years old, and I'm playing since I was 6. And after my pro career, playing around Hampton and with pickup hockey. Kenny Linsman lives in town, and we play pickup hockey. And we'd go to Canada. We'd go up into the Maritimes, and we'd barnstorm, play 4 games in 4 nights, driving in bad weather. I mean, it's been. I could write a book about all that, and it just isn't appropriate. The great thing about this sport, if you can stay healthy, you can play it the rest of your life. There's guys out there 70, 80 years old playing in pickup hockey. It's great. Yeah.
Well,
I won't be, but there are guys.
Yes. Yeah. No, it sounds that way. But so a couple more questions. One, specific to the game of hockey today. How do you think that? I mean, obviously, you can talk about the emergence of helmets and things like that, but just in general, how do you think the game has changed to get to the state where it is today? And do you think that that's for better or worse? Like, is the game better today than it was when you played? Or
I think it's a tough term to use. It's better. It's different, and it's good. But whether it's better or not, I mean, I was fortunate that I came in at the end of old-time hockey. I would have loved to play in the original 6. If you played in the original 6, you're only one of 120 people in the world that was playing at the top level. There's only 6 teams, and then with expansion, it brought in more jobs. And, I was fortunate. I caught the end of old-time hockey, and in 79, the helmet rule came. Well, I never wore a helmet all those years up to that. And I did put one on initially, and then I got a puck in the head practice, blood clot in the brain. And I joked that my mother said I couldn't play anymore unless I put a helmet on. And so I put a Java on, like Nifty wore. And it had a little tag on the inside, so it's not recommended for ice hockey. And that's what I wore to the end of my career. But no, it's... I think I'm fortunate to have played there, but I saw the game change in the 80s from the 70s. And then again, it changes just about every decade. Then they changed the rule and they put the red line out, so the NHL has been tinkering, and thank goodness they haven't changed the game that much from the original game. But the athletes got better. Look at the goalies and the goalie equipment, the size of them now. But what's good is they haven't made the rink bigger than the net bigger than 4x6. They didn't change just the basics of the game. And that's what I'm glad they didn't do. But they have accommodated the better athlete, the more conditioned athlete, the faster athlete. But you still have, even though the goalies are so big, still got guys scoring 50 goals a year. And so the good thing is that the game hasn't changed that much. And I hope it never does, really. I hope maybe they're going to have to make the rinks a little bigger, whether it's Olympic size or not, down the road, to accommodate the next great athlete. I can't see how they could get in any better shape than they're in now or any bigger. But
I know.
You never know where it's going to go from here. But I think the game is great today. You know, there's not as much fighting. I was never a fighter, but I know that it was a tactic used by certain teams, like the Broad Street Bullies or the Big Bad Bruins or whatever, to get an edge. You still have to have tough players and tough teams because you know how hard it is to get to the Stanley Cup Finals. That just isn't guys that can, you know, put the puck in the net. It's a grind.
Right,
and you can see by all the injuries. Bruins have 4 guys out, most of them caused by last year's playoffs. So starting this year.
Yeah.
So it's still a grind. It's still a tough sport. And I'm kind of happy where it is.
So before we close this thing out, I just want to ask you, because you do run a business today called Set Sail, right?
Yeah, it's a small LLC I started back in 2010. I worked with C.B. Sullivan Company, an air product company of all things, when I retired. And C.B. was a great friend of mine. He sold the company in 2010. So I just started an LLC because I do many different things for income, you know, whether it's promotions, whether it's, you know, the NHL or the Bruins alumni. So I just run a lot of my businesses through my LLC. So I don't really make anything or perform a service, but I use it for promotions and that sort of thing. It's worked out well for me, and then I can write off my expenses.
Well, Nifty, thank you so much for joining us today. It really has been a pleasure, and just all too kind to join us.
I always like talking hockey. Thank you.
Yeah, and I wish you all the best, especially in Hampton. Like I said, I got family in Hampton. I was just there this past weekend. Yeah. A beautiful, beautiful place and a great place to hang them up. So
I think so. I've been here since '97, and I'm probably going to stay here until it's all over.
It's a good place to stay. So enjoy. Thank you so much, and I hope our paths cross again at some point.
I do too, Dan. And if anything, if you ever need me to connect with somebody, some of the other Bruins, being the president, I have a few phone numbers in my pocket. So,
hey, I just might do that. Might do that. Thanks again, Nifty. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Take care.